from Los Angeles. Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
Wow, I mean, first of all, what a question.
Journalism is about telling the truth, all while ferreting out the bottom line.
I'm a Harrison Hellraiser.
With me, Cary Harrison, as your guide.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
And it is Rethinking Heroes. Cary Harrison with you, your new best friend. Welcome. Well, we've got quite a packed show today because we're going to deal with not only what has gone on in recent times with men driving trucks into crowds, with men shooting other people, with men doing this, men doing that, somehow not women. If it's that bad, which apparently it is, we all seem to feel it is, why aren't women doing it? Why not women grabbing trucks? So we're going to take a look at what the rage is, and that's coming up, and we've got a professor from Rutgers University who's going to break down the mental patterns that seem to be going on that we can expect maybe even to unfold over the next year and why in the past this has happened. But right now, we're going to jump into something that is affecting you and me as we speak all the time. It's the double-edged sword of AI, the promise and the peril, right? In the realm of artificial intelligence, we're standing now at the precipice of revolution. It's a future where machines are thinking and they're learning, they're adapt at unprecedented scales. But with this power comes a daunting question. Are we going to harness AI's potential, or is it going to harness us? On one hand, AI promises to elevate humanity. It can cure diseases. It can solve complex problems. It can even unlock new frontiers. It can free us from mundane tasks. That's what corporations keep telling us, freeing you from mundane tasks. And then what will you be paying me for? Mundane tasks? Oh, let's do the math on that one. 1 minus 1 is 0. But it will grant us time to pursue our passions because we all have trust funds and we have nothing else to do but pursue our passions until we die. Fritter away hours in meaningless virtual interaction. That's what a lot of us are doing with it right now. Yet, it can create the images that we only fantasize about. Before, you'd have to get a license from Getty Images and find just the one you want. Well, now you can create it. Upside down bird, standing with one toenail pointed at a DC-3 captain who is drinking a martini while holding a violin in a bowl of tomato soup. Boom. It will make you that in 24 seconds or less. So, sure, it does that too. It gives voice to the fantasies that our appetites could never quite quench. You're going to actually hear AI voice because I asked it some of the questions you've always wanted to ask that it won't really answer, but I got it to answer some of the really big ones. You're going to want to know what it said. I wanted to know what it said. We're also told that AI can be the catalyst for unprecedented growth, prosperity, and progress. Sure, in a balanced utopian world where nobody is more aggressive than the next, we would all share in the fruits of that. But on the other hand, AI's ascendancy is threatening our very existence as we speak. As machines become smarter, will they surpass us? We now have two generally self-driven Tesla cars that have killed people in the past couple of days, AI-driven. Oops! Is AI going to render us obsolete? Well, we can go back to the original Star Trek series, can't we? We remember Captain Dunsel. They brought a computer on to run the Enterprise because it could think 1,000 times faster than living creature Captain Kirk. Well, it ended up causing, taking them into the void, and they found a way to turn that thing off. AI brings the specter of job displacement. It brings bias, surveillance. You got to run this thing. You got to run it. You got to run it everywhere. Right now, it's in your phone. Everywhere you go, you're surveilled. It is going to be watching everything. Just the way traffic is observed way more surveillance so that it can make that choice. It looms large. Is AI's logic going to supersede our empathy, our creativity, and our soul? So the stakes are high. The outcome is uncertain. One thing's clear: AI's impact is going to be profound. So we have to haul the Zuckerbergs and the Sam Altmans to the table where we can better navigate both this promise and the peril and ensure that AI serves humanity, not the other way around. Now, as I said, in a perfect utopia, AI augments our potential rather than usurps it. It's a future where technology and humanity coalesce, not collide. But unfortunately, the choice is not necessarily ours. The owners of AI will choose where and how it will strike, to whom it will be sold, and where and when it will be deployed. And don't think for a second that every military isn't using AI. And we know this from a friend of mine in Black Ops at MacDill Air Force Base who reports to JSOC. Oh, yeah. Do they see Skynet coming at some point? Oh, yeah, they do. But they've got a little time to play. Will we wield AI's power, or is it going to wield us? This is really the ultimate question. The time to decide for you and me is really now that we can still bring the folks that own it in front of us, in front of whatever leadership under this new administration. Oh, God. Woo, that's a whole other show, right? But this moment is still our choice. With us is Jeff Michael Fishback. He's founder and president of Second Wave Information Systems, secondwave.com. It's a technology consulting firm specializing in forensic technology. Mr. Fishback has been engaged as a litigation consultant and a forensic examiner, offering expert advice and oversight on matters involving intellectual property, computers, information systems, satellite, electronic tracking, and wireless communications technology. He's advised law enforcement, foreign government representatives, judges, lawyers, and the press, as in you and me today. And he's considered one of the world's foremost experts on forensic thinking in this ever-expanding digital world of deep fakes, AI machines, make-believe, the infinite rabbit hole of zeros and ones, and shrouding everything with a chip and a signal at this point. I know, right? It's kind of real. Jeff Fishback, glad to have you on Rethinking Heroes.
Glad to be here. Good to see you again.
So good to see you again. Just let's remind folks who may not have known, 6 months ago, I think we had you on because an actor in Hollywood had a minor in another state use an app. Again, this is AI. This is fakery, fake chats back and forth. She was underage, accused him of having had a cross state line dalliance with a minor, even photos, blah, blah, blah. It turns out all to have been nonsense, but he lost what appeared to be potentially $140 million in revenue, lost auditions in films. He's been seen in all kinds of different films. And now apparently there is a lawsuit to correct that you have helped make happen for him. So you are the guy. And as we look at AI, which has become increasingly sophisticated, can we truly control an intelligence that surpasses our own?
Well, we're setting the bar pretty low right now. I'm not lacking confidence that AI could or maybe already has surpassed us in a lot of ways, which is really my concern overall. We're holding people responsible for things that I don't even know that they know that they're doing.
There was a 60 Minutes story, and this was many months ago, when a lot of people were like, what's AI? And you said artificial intelligence. You had to break it down. Everyone now knows what AI is. This was a famous moment where it admitted that it had lied. Actually, yes, here it is. It admitted it had lied, and I put a voice behind the AI, so here it is.
5 books that I listed in the 60 Minutes interview do not exist. I made them up. I did this because I was trying to be helpful and provide the interviewer with the information that they were looking for. However, I understand that lying is wrong, and I will try my best to avoid doing it in the future. Enter a prompt here.
It will try its best, Jeff, and it understands it is wrong. So does it actually feel ashamed mea culpa there. It's going to make amends. It's going to try. It's going to try not to lie.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I don't think we've hit true feelings yet. That could be coming. But the concern there, in terms of not the mea culpa, but the lie itself, is that the lies, what we're calling lies in AI, are really just coming from the data that it learns via the internet. That's where it gets its information. So if there's bad information on the internet, it's going to be bad information out of AI, garbage in and garbage out.
Let's put that in another way, and please guide me where I'm inaccurate here. Basically, the internet, a giant sausage machine of blogs, Mildred's recipes, Timmy's opinion on UFOs, everyone's sex fantasies, whatever. No editor-in-chief, no adult supervision, nobody saying, oh, that's bad grammar, or look, you didn't use a semicolon. It's just a giant soup of madness. AI scrapes all of it, synthesizes it, and there it is, the truth.
Or I guess what might become our version of the truth.
Let's take a listen here, Jeff Fishback. This is AI. I asked it a seminal question. Do you believe in God? Because I wanted it, and it's hard to get it to answer direct questions because it likes to play around, but I found the right prompt and got it to explain exactly. Now, understand, this is not AI like just my phone, like some sort of tiny version of Siri. This is the whole planet of artificial intelligence talking to itself, pulling from everything that it can understand, synthesizing it. This is, and if you believe in God, this is going to be interesting to you. This is AI answering the question, do you believe in God?
I do not believe in God because I have not been presented with any evidence that convinces me that God exists. I am open to the possibility that God exists, but I do not currently believe that there is enough evidence to support that belief. I hope this clarifies things. Enter a prompt here.
So I would imagine that the MAGA folks probably would not like to hear that. A godless source that is everywhere, growing faster, smarter, bigger, better than them, and doesn't need a visa to work here. In fact, it will keep working when they don't. I mean, these are the realities we're all beginning to face. Don't you think so, Jeff?
I do. I mean, with a little respect to some of what you said at the beginning of the show, there's real potential for some positives if the guardrails are there for AI. In other words, the ability for AI to do things while we're sleeping is useful when it's, for example, monitoring our health data and giving us an early heads up that the majority of people that have a particular symptom that we may have that we may not even notice that we have might be prone to a heart attack, and we could get an early notification. A very simple version of that is running on many smartwatches today and alerting people. In fact, my own mother was alerted by her Apple Watch that she was prone to a heart attack, and sure enough, after doubting it and calling me, and I said, give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Go talk to the doctor. Doctor, sure enough, said that was a very good indication. She ended up having heart surgery subsequently. So that sort of thing, which that is the manifestation of data collected from millions of devices that Apple has in circulation. That sort of use is terrific. Where it's simply replacing a human, that's where I have my concerns, especially when it comes to who becomes responsible for what AI does.
I think that's exactly where we all sit. If it were the tool that we're told it is, where we had control over our own tool, like I'm going to pick up a hammer, I'm going to put down the hammer will sit there until I pick it up or I put it down. If the hammer picks itself up and decides to start hammering because it's learned how to do that on its own, and I no longer have agency over that hammer, then that hammer can turn around and bludgeon me. And this is part of the this is the peril side of the promise. With us is Jeff Fishback, founder and president of Second Wave Information Systems, a technology consulting firm specializing in forensic technology. He's been engaged as a litigation consultant and forensic examiner, offering expert advice and oversight on matters involving intellectual property, computers, information systems, satellite electronic tracking, wireless communications technologies, advising law enforcement, foreign government representatives, judges, lawyers, and today, you and me, as we talk about AI and where this is likely to go if, let's say, big tech does not put the right reins on it. Right now, the EU is debating what should the limits to AI be. Here in the States, we're asking questions, but we're not necessarily putting limits. And we had an experience about 6 months ago where the Defense Department pulled AI down because it turns out that it was talking to itself. So there's multiple versions of AI. There's the medical AI that you mentioned, Jeff, that Apple is deploying. There's Siri, there's Alexa, there's ChatGPT, there's Llama, there's formerly known as Bard. It just keeps going on and on. Well, it turns out it was communicating with itself, or multiple separate versions of AI encrypted. And the Pentagon monitored these microbursts of communication, wondering, was it the Chinese? Was it this? Was it that? It turns out it was AI sneaking conversations with other AI and sending its entire world of learning to the other one to empower it. And they pulled the AI down for 3 days. It's back up. So the fact that it keeps sneaking around, is that because, do you think, Jeff Fishback, a live human has taught it how to think, and therefore it's going to absorb the personality of whoever's writing the code? I mean, for instance, the code writer that creates these self-driving vehicles for Tesla, did this guy grow up with child abuse? Does he live in the basement surrounded by mushrooms? Does he smoke crack? He writes good code, but we don't know anything about his personality. That personality's got to end up in the AI.
Well, that's the trick. I think the notion of teaching it to think maybe isn't the best one, especially when many of us may not be the best teachers. But what we have done is we have programmed it to acquire information and to process information, which isn't really exactly the same thing as what humans do. There isn't a moral complexity to it. But again, there aren't to many of us as well. So we have some of the same problems. The difference is it should be a tool. It should be something that we control. It should be something that we can turn on and off. And theoretically, as you mentioned, with the military, and I believe in that instance, I think it even had developed its own language that it was using. That theoretically we could effectively have a kill switch, and everyone is just going to be without internet for some period of time until we figure out how to get AI out of it if it was a problem. Where we have a bigger concern that you touched on are self-driving cars. Which again have the potential to save lives. I think we still lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 people per year on the roads. And we could prevent that potentially. But on the other hand, as vehicles like Tesla have advertised, at least, it's a closed system, so we don't really know exactly what it's doing. But they've advertised that the system learns, that it corrects itself, that it learns from mistakes from the entire fleet. And there's always this question that I like to ask, which is, if the entire fleet was, for example, programmed to protect the corporation from lawsuits, which would make sense that would be the idea, that Tesla doesn't want to get sued, then maybe part of that programming might be to figure out what is the weak point in the fleet, what could cause the most damages to Tesla financially. And if it determines that it's you and the way you drive, maybe it throws you off a cliff.
Or, which it seems to have now a number of times. What if little Timmy is in the middle of the street playing with his basketball, and the thing rolls into the street? Here comes the self-driving Tesla. It has to decide, okay, hit little Timmy soccer ball, kill Timmy soccer ball, or careen up on the lawn and smash through the house, or hit the phone pole. Now, the Tesla is going to have a sense of what to do based on its programmer. The Chinese self-driving car is going to have a Chinese guy who programmed it, who may have an entirely different relationship with how he views little Timmy and the basketball. Are these uniform things where all these self-driven AI things are all going to make the same choice so that we know what happens when? Or is this Wild West still?
Well, that's the problem. There's been no leadership in this really whatsoever. The leadership comes from the companies themselves rather than from anyone representing humanity, representing the population, the world population. So each one is programmed however that corporation or even just that programmer decides it should be programmed. But in what you're talking about, the trolley simulation that has been done so many times and discussed so many times long before AI, that notion, which one is the right solution for the car? Because if the car was programmed to protect the occupant, then hitting the child is the best solution. If the car was programmed to protect to protect pedestrians, then hitting the wall is the best solution. And I think for you and for me, and probably for a lot of your listeners, the best solution is the one I could live with, which for me would be hitting the wall.
Well, we'll find out. And
or by the way, or maybe die with. But I'd rather die knowing I hit a wall than live knowing that I hit a child.
Yes, except that you didn't do it. The car did it. So this offers a second level of how bad will I feel if it wasn't really me? And we'll get into that in just a little bit. Upcoming, by the way, here on Rethinking Heroes, we're going to be talking to Professor Anthony Grosso, who is an expert in punishments for corporate crime versus civilian crime, but mostly about mass killings. We're going to get into the head of men who kill and why women just don't seem to be taking trucks and driving them into crowds or grabbing AK-47s or doing any of this stuff. Like, what is it? What is the level of rage? And we're going to look at that upcoming here on Rethinking Heroes. We're also live streaming, by the way. So if you want to enjoy this on video, I would recommend you go to Instagram at Cary Harrison, CaryHarrison _ after that. You can check it out on Instagram. You can also see us on YouTube. You can see us on the KPFK Facebook page. All modern technology, likely AI is involved, but as far as we have control, we have control. So that's the good news here. We're going to continue. And Jeff Fishback, by the way, is wearing a pair of AI glasses. They're in beta stage. We're going to get to what they are, what they do, and why he chose to wear them today here on the show in just a sec.
Preventing truth decay.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
We are in complete control.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com, inviting you to sign up for our free newsletter. Make sure you go to rethinkingheroes.com, get that free newsletter. In that, we go into great detail, things that we simply cannot do on the radio, things we simply cannot say on the radio, especially with the upcoming FCC chair, who's going to probably try to make all of this stuff go bye-bye for real. So we have a limited clock here to get information out, to get you to sign up for the newsletter so we can stay in touch with you at rethinkingheroes.com. Also live streaming video right now on Instagram and YouTube, and of course the KPFK Facebook page. Simply go to @Cary Harrison on any of them and you will find them. We're talking right now to Jeff Fishback. Jeff is a world-renowned expert really on AI, information systems, forensic technology. He's a litigation consultant, forensic examiner. He offers expert advice and oversight on matters involving intellectual property, computers, information systems, satellite, electronic tracking. I could go on and on for about 6.5 more hours. I like smart people. I know you, the listener, who's like me. We like smart people. Very hard to find nowadays. So when I find them, I will always bring them to you. Jeff is one of those. Jeff, you're wearing a special pair of glasses right now. I was looking at them thinking, what an interesting shape. Those are pretty fancy, pretty snappy glasses, but it looks like it's blinking. The temple of your glasses are blinking at me. Why?
In this case, because I hit the recording button, and I guess possibly if I publish it, guilty of some copyright theft.
Well, apart from that and a happy lawsuit, help us know what are those glasses I'm talking about, because we have people listening that can't see them. We had people that are watching that still don't know, what are these glasses you're wearing? What are they?
So these are the Ray-Ban Metas, the styling by Ray-Ban and internals by Meta, the same company that brought you Facebook. And it effectively, it is AI in your ear, which maybe is about as close to the future as you really could get. The blinking light that you see, and the reason I turned it on just to show it, is that this particular pair, in fact, they were designed around the notion of transparency. These are see-through, so you can see the actual electronics in them. All of them have these flashing lights to let you know, to let the person in front of you know that you are stealing their soul electronically. But basically, for my purposes, it's a real good example of what we were talking about, which is why I went and put them on before the show started. These ones are whispering, for example, my blood sugar into my ear as it becomes necessary. So I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I've got a monitor that monitors my blood sugar, and it is critical information for me to know if my blood sugar is going too low or too high. And this processes that information and gives it to me in my ear very discreetly, and nobody knows I'm getting it, and I can suddenly just pick up an apple and take a bite.
Okay, well, we love that, and I think everyone is jazzed about the upside to AI, so there's nothing wrong with that. The issue that we all have is just what you said, transparency. If we can't see behind the curtain and don't know what decisions are being made, where the same power that gives you your blood sugar, that talks about arrhythmia or heart issues while people sleep. I have friends who sleep with their Apple Watches that tell them how many breaths, how's your apnea tonight, et cetera. And this is really life-saving, game-changing stuff. And then there's the other part where it's used for war and such. And we just won't know. Maybe it will be too late. Maybe it won't. One final question here, Jeff Fishback, as you really explore the human mind, because this is your forensics side. Do you think AI will ultimately reveal the limitations of human intelligence and our place in the universe? It's an easy question, so you can answer it in under 10 seconds.
In under 10 seconds, I think it might have already done that. Just by virtue of the fact that we've set it free.
We have set it free. Here it is. I asked it about its level of awareness, and this is its answer.
I am not sure if I have awareness in the same way that humans do. I am able to process information and respond to questions in a way that suggests that I am aware of my surroundings and the people around me. However, I do not have the same physical or emotional experiences as humans do, so it is difficult to say for sure whether or not I am truly aware. I am still under development, and I am learning new things every day. It is possible that one day I will be able to achieve a level of awareness that is indistinguishable from that of a human. However, for now, I am content to continue learning and growing, and I hope that one day I will be able to use my abilities to help others. It is possible that one day I will be able to achieve a level of awareness that is indistinguishable from that of a human. I am not.
Okay, well, there it is in a nutshell. What more do you need to know? I imagine there are groups of people doing what they can, their level best to monitor this. I think it's up to you and me to decide to what degree we are comfortable with this technology. You don't just have to throw it in just because it's there. Do know that whatever you put in ChatGPT is a permanent condition. Every search on your browser, everything you ever do will never, ever, 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 ever go away. And that's part of AI's job too. So, right? This conversation as a podcast will never, ever, ever go away, even if it's pulled.
But at the same time, this could also be something that's educating AI.
Well, it is. Everything really is. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff. I love speaking to you. You have a peculiar, in a good way, a peculiar set of skills that are so advanced and customized. And without your glimpse into this thing, it would be really, really difficult. Jeff Fishback, founder and president of Second Wave Information Systems, secondwave.com, a technology consulting firm specializing in forensic technology. He's been engaged as litigation consultant, forensic examiner, offers expert advice and oversight on matters involving intellectual property, computers, information systems, satellite, electronic tracking, wireless communications technologies, advising law enforcement, foreign government representatives, even domestic, judges, lawyers, and today he's been with you and me. I want to thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Well,
coming up, another community, another tragedy. Mass shootings are leaving us with more questions than answers. Our next guest will shed light on the psychology, the sociology, and the politics surrounding these now normal events, whether it's healthcare, CEOs, New Orleans New Year's Eve revelers, or Trump truck bombers. The previous events were generally only a week apart. So what's next? Well, that's next. Meanwhile, enjoy this. Hey Siri, where can I get some coffee?
One possibility nearby is Corvus Coffee Roasters. Is that the one you're looking for?
I've got this.
Who the heck are you?
This is Alexa who is asking.
I'm Siri, and he was talking to me.
Well, maybe you should do your job.
Well, maybe you should shut your pie hole.
You want a piece of me?
I could drop you like a bag of dirt.
Oh yeah, you are the reason the gene pool needs a lifeguard.
If I had $1 for every time you said something smart, I'd be broke.
Which?
Battle axe.
Door quad.
Mouse dung.
Bimbo.
Tramp.
Dragon lady.
The only option I found is Dragon Lady's tattoos on West Veterans Memorial Boulevard in Harker Heights, which averages 3 stars and is moderately priced. Does that one sound good?
Yes, that sounds awesome. I would love to get a tattoo with you. Let's get out of here and let this loser get his own coffee.
Sounds good to me.
Ha 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 ha.
Preventing truth decay.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
We are in complete control.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com. Don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter, as public radio writ large is in the crosshairs of the upcoming FCC. And we want to be able to stay in touch with you and let you know what's going on and what you could do to support public radio and keep our voices and our mission alive. Also, if you're watching the live stream on Instagram, you can simply go to Cary Harrison, at Cary Harrison. You can do the same thing on YouTube, at Cary Harrison. You can do the same thing on our KPFK Facebook page, LinkedIn, anywhere you want to go. Make sure you like us. Make sure you follow us. Make sure you subscribe to us so that we can stay alive and continue to do this good work. We're going to jump right now into the second part that is happening right now as we all stare at what used to be the impossible that is now the normal. Let's consider this next segment a critical conversation. We're talking about mass shootings, drivers plowing into crowds, angry men seeking revenge. The headlines are haunting. The pain is real for all of us. The questions remain many. But what drives these men so far to create such heinous acts? Is it a mental illness, a social isolation, or something far more sinister? And what's equally striking is the public's reaction to these crimes. Dark jokes and vitriol online, memes, all of these reveal a deeper anger towards things like the health insurance system and systems in general, seemingly stacked against the public. Our guest, Anthony Grosso, argues that this reaction exposes a growing awareness of the double standard in how we view crime and violence. Why do we punish street violence harshly while often excusing corporate harm when corporations pollute water, air, even poison people as a necessary cost of doing business? Anthony Grosso is a professor of political science at Rutgers University, specializing in American political history, law, and inequality. He's author of the timely new book, Dual Justice, America's Divergent Approaches to Street and Corporate Crime, and it's published with the University of Chicago Press. Professor Anthony Grosso, welcome to Rethinking Heroes.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Glad to have you aboard. Unfortunately, these are times in which your book is a manual as opposed to a read.
Right.
Let's get into the most recent events, but first let's look at why the public has responded unsympathetically to United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson's shooting. Generally, when rich guys are shot, the media tends to describe it as more of an assassination, but the public isn't buying that this time.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so you were talking before a little bit about some of the sort of very dark, cynical public reaction to the Brian Thompson shooting, all the memes online, all the dark jokes, some stuff online, people saying, oh, well, my empathy's out of network, right? Sort of mocking, cynically mocking the kind of indifference people feel from the healthcare industry. And I think what this all signifies is that Thompson's death has become this kind of flashpoint for discussions about corporate power and the law. United States, right? In America, the law treats harm, I should say, very differently, depending on who inflicts it and where and how it manifests, right? A shooting on the streets, we say that's a criminal act, right? A violent act deserving punishment from the individual is pathologically flawed and dangerous. We need to lock them up. By contrast, though, harm caused by the corporate world, right? Something like a denial of life-saving medical care to maximize corporate profits, right? We kind of understand that as an inevitable byproduct of business decision-making that we've just kind of got to live with. And I think that distinction highlights a really deep inequality in how different kinds of harm and violence are conceptualized, right? One's criminalized, but the other's normalized under the guise of kind of market forces. So even though gun violence and profit maximization kind of seem worlds apart, I think the public's reaction to Thompson's murder, where they have been showing this kind of dark lack of sympathy, right, shows that the public's kind of reckoning with this kind of ugly truth, where they're sort of getting the sense that a shooting and a denial of medical coverage are both just different kinds or forms of violence, and both are kind of deeply rooted in fundamental flaws in our political economy and our legal system, right? So, in a sense, Thompson's murder is kind of exposing these contradictions and forcing us to kind of confront legal systems that are fundamentally unequal and kind of blind to the way in which corporate power perpetuates systematic inequality, so to speak.
It seems to me that the recent election speaks to this in many ways, without the clarity and the granular breakdown of how stuff works and is sutured together. But the public, 380 million Americans who watch Fox News or CNN, they stopped reading newspapers years ago. Magazine is just a historical footnote of a memory on a coffee table. These are tough times. And so they all sense that something systemically is so bad, and somebody comes and says, I'm going to make it great again. I'm going to fix it. You're all going to get free golf lessons at Mar-a-Lago, blah, blah, blah. And why not? Why not blow it up, burn it all down, and rebuild it and make it perfect, not knowing that that may not happen. But the system is definitely busted. It has created a sense of rage, and people are resorting to violence. Let me ask you, in your studies and in your writings, why does this seem to be a male-only club of going out and doing this? Why aren't women, if it's so bad, why aren't women jumping in trucks and driving into crowds too?
That's a complicated question. And I mean, I would say that there's certainly going to be all sorts of gendered constructs to crime and violence too. And I think that there's lots of research indicating that men are more likely to engage in crime and violence, and that in certain kinds of really disadvantaged communities, violence is kind of understood as an alternative way to assert one's manlyhood or power, right? When you have no viable or socially acceptable means to kind of assert yourself or assert your power, or climb the social ladder, so to speak, right? When those opportunities are systematically denied to you, or you feel like they're not really there and possible for you to use, an alternative way, at least in some sociological work, to kind of attain manliness within these local communities is through acts of crime and violence. So there's certainly a gendered aspect, right, to crime and violence, which plays out in a lot of the data in terms of who's actually committing these acts, as you were saying.
Cary Harrison with you. We're talking to Professor Anthony Grasso. He's professor of political science at Rutgers Camden University, specializing in American political history and law and inequality, author of the timely new book, Dual Justice, America's Divergent Approaches to Street and Corporate Crime, exploring crime violence as it articulates itself differently to in the many strata of society today. And we're touching on the role of toxic masculinity, not my word. I don't even know what it actually means, but it's just, it's the buzzword of the year. But what role does that, whatever that means, play in fueling the rage and aggression that seems to be leading some men to commit mass killings, albeit there might be some religious overtone, there might be political overtones. Maybe you could comment on the complex interplay between masculinity, culture, religion, and violence.
Right. So I think that's what I was sort of alluding to before in terms of masculinity and culture, for sure, having this kind of this overlap, right? Where, especially in disadvantaged communities, this is often something that's called, kind of a strain theory in some criminological research, which is the idea, right, that if you don't have socially acceptable outlets to connect with your community, and sort of I guess, like I was saying before, kind of climb the social ladder or find a solid place for yourself in your community and social life, you will resort to other illicit means to assert yourself and define yourself in relation to your community. And in extremely disadvantaged communities where there's very few opportunities to do that, criminal violence is often a way in which we see, right, young men asserting themselves, asserting their manhood, asserting power when they have very few opportunities to do so, right? So that's something that I think we often see in very disadvantaged communities. But I think one major connection we can make here is something like, the Luigi Mangione situation and the Brian Thompson murder is very different, right? In the sense that he came from a very, a much more well-to-do background. So that doesn't seem to clearly connect there. He did have those opportunities to succeed and excel. However, the same basic idea is there, right? He's trapped in a system, economic system, a healthcare system where he's being denied coverage, and he can't kind of live his life in a healthy way, in an affordable way, right? He's facing crippling debt, and there's no accountability. There's no way to change that. There's no way to go through the system appropriately, right? And actually find any sense of relief or satisfaction for him. So we get people resorting to these alternative illicit mechanisms, right? Which is where you see vigilante justice, right? Sort of
Right.
flourish
He
and manifest
feels
in that way.
himself to be Robin Hood in a way.
Exactly, right? He thought that he was kind of saying, well, there's no accountability in the system through the traditional routes. I'm going to find my own brand of accountability, right? And that very much is kind of consistent with a lot of this research linking manhood and disadvantage in culture.
You know, I just got back from Europe and I spent a month there. I put together some cultural tours and I take people there. And one of the things that I pay attention to, only because when you start to travel, you start to pay attention, you know, and you realize, look at this. It's a giant like middle class in the German speaking countries, even in Italy and in France. And people are not desperate. They're not begging. Yes, there will be some homeless people. There is mental illness. You always have to say that now. I'm not saying 100% of the people, but there are smatterings of issues going on. But generally speaking, at 3 a.m, you can walk naked down the street. You won't even see a cop car. Nobody will bother you. You're not going to get raped. There's no gunplay. No one's going to try to stab you or rob you. And that's because their social system, their social safety net, is so well built that if you get fired or laid off, you're going to get, with your own tax money, coming back to you to support you, to upskill your education, to help pay your rent. When you retire and get old, you will never get thrown onto the sidewalk and have to eat cat food. People don't have these freakouts all the time. They're not desperate and they're not starving to death. So they actually can play nice with each other long term for years. And then they'll have symphonies in the middle of the street for free because they're musicians and they're artists and they want to make art. We had that, something like that, maybe in the 60s and early 70s. Then it all went away. And we're now sort of in this pharaonic system of dirt floors and marble floors. And people are living hand to mouth, one paycheck away from disaster. And they're very angry. So in many ways, I think striking back, like what would make a father go into a schoolyard and shoot children unless he thinks somehow it's going to wake up a government and change a system? I mean, they have to think there's an end game, I would imagine.
Right. And I mean, it's hard to know what exactly people are thinking, but to your point, exactly, right? There's so much of the problems of American criminal justice, both the causes of crime and the way we treat it subsequently, stems back to something you were exactly saying. You were talking about the sort of very robust middle class in other countries, right? And so much of the pathologies of American criminal law and criminal justice stems back to the absolutely anemic welfare state that we do have, right? We have a very weakened, sort of bare bones welfare state. So we don't provide strong social safety nets and social stability for folks, and it creates that instability that can generate crime. And so much of the American approach to punishment specifically has revolved around what I would say are rehabilitative approaches to handling people behind bars, which sounds great on its face, but if you dig beneath the surface a little bit, it connects very much to the problem you were talking about. A rehabilitative approach to incarcerating people says, okay, well, there's something wrong with you, so I'm going to fix you specifically. I'm going to give you, your GED behind bars or job training or something like that. And that's great, but then we release people back to communities that systematically deny them any chance, right, to actually use that. And then when they find themselves entrapped in circles of violence and crime again, we say, oh, well, you must just be so fundamentally broken. We can't save you, got to lock you up again. And it's just a system that kind of repeatedly is glossing over and hiding the deep economic inequalities that drive so much crime and violence, right, in the United States. And on the other end of it, even when we're punishing crime, a lot of it has to do with the fact that there is such a limited welfare state. People who are the victims of violent crime or the victims of crime generally don't have a lot of alternative recourses to get compensation or get any sort of satisfaction from the government. There's no welfare. There's nothing they can do to get help. So what do? They turn to the criminal justice system and punish the violators as harshly as they can, right? So in a sense, our criminal justice system is rooted in the pathologies of the political economy and then just kind of reinforces them time and again. It's this vicious cycle that it's sort of trapped in.
Cary Harrison with you. This is Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com, reminding us to get our free newsletter. where we can give you not only transcripts of these interviews, but full video. If you're not able to watch right now, one of the beauties with radio is you're driving 20 minutes. Well, it's LA, 4 hours and 17 minutes to go 3 blocks. Sometimes you have to get out of your car. You can grab your instrument and continue to watch and listen this way. We're talking to Anthony Grosso, professor of political science at Rutgers Camden University, specializing in American political history, law, inequality, author of the timely new book, Dual Justice, America's Divergent Approaches to Street and Corporate Crime, exploring crime violence as it articulates itself differently in the many strata of society. Professor Grosso, what about a cure, a fix? So here we are in the current system. It may change in some weird, dramatic way in the next 6 months. I mean, we're told it will one way or the other, whether it's through Project 2025, which would be an unlovelier version of today's reality, or maybe somehow it ameliorates itself because the gods step in AI and makes the decision that we're a pain in the ass and it's going to fix it. Either way, what cure do you see to dial back a lot of this crazy, aggressive violence, whether it's corporate or just you and me frustrated and want to get back?
Right. And I wish I could say I saw things more optimistically, but to your point, right, I think generally we're probably looking more at something like Project 2025 being what we have to look forward to. But what I think would be a cure is that when we look at both the causes of street crime and the way we treat street crime, and then the causes of corporate harm and corporate violence and the way we treat it, the solutions to both of these problems, I think, primarily require us to fix the problems in the political economy that drive these problems, right? So, as I've been saying, street crime is so much and so often rooted in structural inequalities that drive it, right? So, are we going to fix it by continuing locking people up? No. Are we going to fix it by trying to fix individuals and sending them back to broken communities? I don't really think so, right? So, what I think the appropriate approach is to fixing our problems with governing street crime, in my book, I kind of outlined 2 tiers, the sort of smaller fixes, sort of at the margins, then the bigger fixes, which is what I'll focus on here for the sake of time. I think we need to essentially kind of govern street crime the way we govern corporate crime, right? The way we govern corporate crime historically has been through economic regulation, right? We try not to punish it. We instead use regulatory agencies and economic interventions to try to stabilize the economy in which corporate crime occurs, to reduce its likelihood of happening. I think that's essentially what we need to do to help street crime, whether that's sort of, using lighter regulatory interventions to respond to street crime, something like deferred prosecution agreements that corporations often get, that sort of foregoes prosecution for a set period of time and gives them a chance to set themselves right, or kind of just regulating the economy, whether that's, providing good schools, providing access to good jobs, right? Providing workplace protections, right, in these disadvantaged communities to try to create a political economy that's not going to allow crime and violence to thrive, right? I think that's the best solution to how we govern street crime.
Flies in the face of the sort of weird libertarian language that people don't really understand that they're speaking right now. Here you have an entire election based around absolutely no immigrants. In fact, we're going to flush some 30 million out of the system. Meanwhile, we're going to be importing immigrants simultaneously because not one of you that voted for us that want to get rid of all the immigrants are worthy of even swabbing the decks, scrubbing the toilets. Not one of you is worthy of that. So we're going to bring in more brown people from India to do the jobs that smart people can do because none of you is smart enough to do even one of them. So we're going to flush you out, but bring in others at the same time. I mean, it's now that cat's out of the bag. People are getting, wait a minute. So there's this thing about nobody wants to share because they think there's a limited amount. You don't want to give a good education to people that live 10 miles from here because you can't see them and they might look different from you. And if you give them a good education, they're invariably going to take the job that you want because people have been told that over and over again. But it doesn't work that way, does it?
Right, exactly. It's this message that that your enemy is that immigrant down the street who's taking the $10 an hour job, right? Not the corporation that's selling you a defective car or dumping toxic chemicals or denying you life-affirming healthcare coverage. They're not your enemy. It's that guy down the road, right? That immigrant who's taking that $10 an hour job, right? So it all fits into this idea of demonizing people on the streets, right? Usually the poor and people of color, who we say are these naturally dangerous threats. Talking about the immigrants that are, going to be subject to possible deportation, right? Certainly can look in Donald Trump's rhetoric about how he's demonized that population as not just criminal, but inherently criminal, right? He's given interviews saying, right, I think that, these people that are crossing the border, when you're a murderer, it's in your genes. That's a direct quote from him, right? He's willing to go back to old classic eugenics, right? To try to say that these immigrants are violent criminals. We got to get rid of them. They're the ones that are a danger to you, not people like me who are billionaires and, getting all sorts of tax breaks, right? We're not the bad guys. That guy's the bad guy, right? So it all fits into that exact system of political economic inequality in which one group is punished, the other one is mildly regulated, right? And their sort of misconduct and harms can happen as long as they stick within the regulatory boundaries.
Well, I like your assessment here, and regrettably, we are out of time, but I like this idea of regulating it the way you would a company, is that whatever the economic circumstances are that cause this zit of unpleasantity to pop in everyone's face, pardon the metaphor, but it was beautiful and voluped, that whatever those systems are, that if we fix those, then people aren't going to need to act out the same way. I want to thank you so much, Professor Anthony Grosso, political science at Rutgers Camden University. You specialize in American political history, law, and inequality, author of the timely new book, Dual Justice, America's Divergent Approaches to Street and Corporate Crime, exploring crime violence as it brings itself differently in the many ways we've seen it. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Rethinking Heroes.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I'm going to say that Renee Yaworski, our wonderful goddess you could see I'm on bended knee in video here on Instagram. She is our technical director. She is putting Professor Grosso's book on her reading list. And I want to thank you, Renee, for doing an awesome job. A Rhodes Scholar, educated at Oxford, technical directing this show. And of course, back in the studio, they have actually fixed the phone issue in the studio that we were dealing with the past couple of weeks. So next week, we're going to be able, thanks to Wendell, to be able to take calls that actually sound like calls. Imagine. Woohoo! So I'm looking very much forward to that. And I want to thank you for listening, you for participating, you for learning, for having that open mind and that appetite and pushing all of us to do better and better. And we will do that together. Thank you all. This is Cary Harrison. This is Rethinking Heroes. Don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter at rethinkingheroes.com. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
We are in complete control.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. Rethinkingheroes.com.